I am Erin Gerdes. I am absolutely thrilled to be here at Bransford as your principal. This is my 21st year in GCISD as an employee, 22nd year in education. I was born in Grapevine and was raised here. I went to Colleyville Elementary and Colleyville Middle and Grapevine High School because at that time, it was so long ago, there was no Colleyville Heritage yet. So I've been around for quite a while. I have two boys. I have a sixth grader that is at CMS, and I have an 10th grader, a sophomore at CHHS that just started driving. So that's a whole new world for us. I've been in the district a while. I love this district. I love this community. I enjoy living here and being a parent here, but also an educator with your children. As we begin this year, we have faced many challenges, but have done so with a ton of support from our PTA and our district leadership and our community. I do have with me tonight Mrs. McClure, our assistant principal, is also on, as well as Nurse Rebecca. So they're going to help me out if there are any things that I neglect to share with you. They may hop in and give a little bit of extra information.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mrs. McClure and Nurse Rebecca, for joining us. Thanks for agreeing to be in the hot seat tonight. So like I said, I organized the questions that we received. We received quite a few into categories. And we are going to start with COVID procedures because that was the majority of questions, no surprise. So I think there were generally a lot of questions just on classroom setup, cafeteria setup, sanitizing procedures. How has all of this stuff affected the master schedule and teacher assignments and all of that? So maybe if you could just talk for a couple minutes about that first, I think it might answer some of the other questions, and then I will go to the more specific items.
Okay, so as you can imagine, the regulations with COVID have impacted our schedule and the flow of a school building greatly. But I feel that we have spent a lot of time planning and implementing things, and we continue to adjust as we see that we need to do so. As far as classrooms go, we do have students. We're fortunate. Their little desks are those little triangle-shaped desks, and we've been able to set up our classrooms to where they are distanced from each other. They use their own supplies. We don't have community supplies at this time. They also have a plexiglass trifold, which I've kind of shortcut to a plexifold, which looks kind of like what they used to use to protect their work, a little office, but it's transparent and that prevents particles from flowing about, even though they also wear their mask. They take that plexifold with them to lunch. In the cafeteria, we have it set up to where only one grade level goes at a time, and they sit 6 feet apart from each other. We have little dots on the tables, and they all face the same direction. And I know we'll talk more about cafeteria in a little while with our students to ensure they're wearing their masks at the proper times and to promote healthy hand hygiene. We continue to ask our students to wash their hands at appropriate times, as well as we have sanitation stations at every hallway intersection, as well as the entrance and exit to recess. So as they move throughout the building, they know to get a little squirt of sanitizer and keep their hands clean. So those are some of the things we have in place. We know our schedule changed from the very beginning of the year when we were all remote and we could all enjoy lunch at the same time and things like that. But as we moved into the building, there was absolutely no way we could keep the schedule the same. And so we had to shift to allow for our students to have that distancing. When they go to recess, one class might be on the soccer field and another class might be on the playground. And we have the staff out there to monitor that as usual. But that way our students are kind of staying, that's why we're calling it a cohort. It's a class, and they just stay together all the time. When they go to specials, they're just only in PE with their cohort and such. So we're able to keep our students distanced from each other. In the event that someone were to have symptoms, then we know where it's easier to track those cases.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I know that since masks are required and kids are of varying degrees and ages of compliance with that. Can you just talk about what happens if a student is reluctant to wear a mask or refuses to wear a mask or just has it on that?
So far we've been very fortunate. Our students are wearing masks easily. You know, kids are resilient and they have adjusted to that new procedure very well. In fact, if there's anything that holds the car line in the morning, it's as they hop out of the car, they realize, I forgot my mask, and they grab it real quick, which is fine. It's a new thing for all of us to get used to. But we ask that all students wear their masks in common areas, the hallways and such. When our pre-K through second grade students get to class and they're in their individual learning space, so they're at their desk and their trifold is up and they're working, they're allowed to take a mask break. But if they get up again, we ask that they put it back on so that they're continuously protected from each other. When they go to lunch, they wear their mask to their seat, but once they sit down in their spot and have their trifold up, then they can take their mask off to eat. For our 3rd through 5th graders, they are also allowed mask breaks that are under 10 minutes with their teacher's direction. Different grade levels do different things based on age appropriateness. But if we have students that do not wear their mask and they're asked to, then we have a few things put in place. So for example, we would visit with a student anytime there's a behavior that's typically indicating something different. So we just have a conversation with the student. It might mean that if the teacher is not successful in getting the student to wear their mask, then they may call the counselor or Nurse Rebecca or myself or Mrs. McClure, and we'll just have a conversation with them and see what's up. And if they still refuse to wear their mask, we would call their parents and talk to them about kind of partnering with us to encourage the wearing of the mask. If we have a student that refuses to wear a mask and it's an issue that we cannot find a solution for, they might be asked to move to remote learning. But again, fortunately, our students are wearing their masks. They're doing an amazing job wearing them appropriately. And we give them reminders, they're children, and they're doing a great job.
Okay, thank you. Next question is there a maximum number of students in a virtual classroom, and does TEA regulate the number of students for virtual?
Okay, so is there a maximum number of students in a virtual classroom? So the latest information I have provided on that is that we'll continue to follow the same classroom size guidelines for remote learners and in-person learners, but we do have the option to request a waiver as needed.
Okay, and kind of a follow-up question to that. For the kids who are in person in the school, but they're being taught by a remote teacher, in the event that more students are moved into that online classroom and the size gets to be excessive, you know, above that class size guideline, would a substitute teacher be available to be with those in-person learners for that classroom? That was kind of confusing, but.
If I think I know what you're asking, if we exceed the amount of students that a teacher can meet their educational need, we might have to shift how that class is set up. So that's why at the beginning of the year, we kind of talked about all teachers in the grade level might at one point teach your child. We want to have consistency for our students. We know that's important. But there could come a time, because we're meeting those requests from parents on the learning style for their student, that if a class is fully remote, and we might need to move them to a blended class where we have some remote students and some in-person students. Currently, the way we have everything set up, we're able to provide with the staff that we have. If we were to have a different need, then we would possibly have to rearrange our cohorts a bit.
Okay, thank you. Next is kind of along the lines of contact tracing. So specifically, a specific question here. If there's an exposure in one classroom, will the other classroom also, this is specific to pre-K. If there's an exposure in one classroom, does everyone in that grade level in pre-K need to move to remote learning? And then along those same lines, if a teacher is exposed or sick, does the entire class move to remote?
So if we have a student, we have an extensive case tracking plan that myself and Nurse Rebecca follow, along with our head director of nursing, Amy Taldo. She works with us through that. And so we keep close contact with the students' parents if there is a suspected case to determine who that child has come in contact with. So in the event that we had a child with a positive case, we would go back through and trace that. That's why we have assigned seating and that such thing, because then we can narrow down to see who they may have come in contact with. So every case could potentially be very different. It depends on the level of contact that a child may have been exposed to. The same for the teacher. So if you had a teacher that maybe was exposed over the weekend and that did not impact the class at all, then we would have a substitute teacher come in and teach the students in person. We wouldn't need to impact our student learning. If we had a teacher who became exposed or ill and it did impact the students, we would determine which students that impacted. And that goes beyond us. That even goes to the Tarrant County Health Department, who help us determine the next steps. If we were to have a positive case on our campus, all families would be notified. We have a letter that would go out. If we suspected that your child might be exposed, you would be contacted. So we have those procedures in place in the event that we need to. It just kind of depends. Every little situation is unique.
Okay, thank you. What are for Kids U, which is our before and after school care, if someone is at Kids U and is exposed, will all the Kids U students have to be quarantined as well? And I suspect your answer is along the same lines as what you just talked about, but is there anything different about Kids U?
It's the same. As far as I know, everything I know about Kids U, they have the same safety measures in place. And if they had an exposure, they would communicate that as well and follow the same case tracking that we do in class, in school.
Okay. A question on vaccine. So once the vaccine is available, has there been any discussion about how that will impact our procedures that are in place and our policies about safety?
Regarding the vaccine, that if there's anything that comes into place, that would be handled at a district level, not at the campus level. At this time, I haven't heard of any information regarding that, but I'm sure once the district has something to share, they'll do that with us.
Okay, and then another specific question about pre-K. Since pre-K is tuition based, in the case of a shutdown, will there be a discount on pre-K tuition? Because a lot of those families and parents would need to then get childcare if they're working families. So would that, I think in the fall there was a discount or a refund. Would that happen again?
That would be an answer that Christy Brown, who our director of early childhood, would answer. She heads pre-K, they're housed here and part of our family, but she takes care of the tuition and those pieces of pre-K.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so those were all of the COVID procedure questions. I'm going to move on to attendance, a couple questions there. So typically when we are in person in a typical year and a student needs to be late because of a doctor's appointment or is going to be out for the day for whatever reason, we call the front office to let Shelly or somebody know that they're going to be out. Does that need to happen, that phone call need to happen for online students as well?
Yes, so for a few different reasons. So Shelly's now moved to the administrative assistant role. So Sam McFadden is our data clerk. So she would be your contact. You can of course call Shelly, she'll tell Sam, but You can also call or email Sam directly. So yes, you do need to call the front office regardless of if your student is in person or remote. We do have to take attendance on our students every single day, regardless of their learning style. And also you need to let Nurse Rebecca know, because Nurse Rebecca is responsible for doing a little investigating when students aren't at school. And even for our remote learners, she still has to also call and ask, why a student might be absent and if it might require case tracking in the event that it could be a suspected COVID case. So when you call, go ahead and ask for Nurse Rebecca, because she will call you if you don't talk to her when you call in the first time.
All right. And then similarly, if a student can't come to school and they're an in-person learner, are they allowed to switch to an online classroom for that day so that they're not marked absent? Or do they just need to take the absence because they're not typically in that online classroom?
So it is a very unique situation because this is not an option that we've had before in education. So there are a few different ways to look at it. If your child is sick, regardless of if they're remote or in person for any reason, if they have strep and ear infection and they cannot do their work that day, it is okay to be sick. There are, so many days that students are allotted sick days. We want to not exceed that 90% in a school year. So it is acceptable for a child to have a sick day. It's okay. If a child is an in-person learner and they have something that's excused, like a doctor's appointment or a situation that we know about, there are certain events that people handle in life that would qualify as an excused absence, and then they could participate remotely in order to still be present and complete the work, so they're not missing out on the learning that's provided. That does require a lot of communication, since we are set up to have mostly in-person or remote classes. We have few blended classes, so that takes a little bit of a transition time to let our remote teachers know if there's going to be a student that's joining them for a day or two due to an excused reason. If it's unexcused, then it's an unexcused absence. So it's important when you call and talk to Sam that we know enough of what's going on so that we know what to expect from our students. But yes, an in-person learner could be remote for an excused reason, but if it turns into a kind of a bouncing back and forth, then we would ask them to go remote.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving into lunch, we had a few questions about the cafeteria and lunchtime procedures. So first, I think you did say that there's assigned seating during lunch. And so somebody asked if there was assigned seating and if the child is using a shield or the shield, can they talk during lunch? How does that work?
Oh yes, they talk. They have so much fun. I know whenever I first saw the setup, it's different than what we've done in the past, but they're not, if you've been before, they kind of face each other like a picnic table, and we have pulled our tables apart so they're all facing one direction. Yes, trust me, they have all kinds of fun at lunch. They talk, they find a way, they giggle, they're silly. We have to remind them to keep eating in the time that they have at lunch. So they have a great time. They do have their plexi fold up, so it protects them while they're eating, as they're talking to each other, but they're doing an amazing job. And we have staff on hand that will bring things to them if they need, so they're not up walking around without their mask off. It's gone really well. Lunch has been really, really good.
Kids are amazing. Okay, a specific question about the menu at lunch and whether there could be more fresh vegetables and fresh cut fruits available. I'm not sure if the menu has changed with this. I know the process for getting lunch has been adjusted with COVID, but has the menu changed at all? And is there an opportunity, or who can we give feedback to on the menu options?
So regarding the menu options, you would want to contact our nutrition department. They're responsible for providing the menu and the choices that our students have. The procedures have changed where when students go through the line, we have stickers on the floor that help them maintain that 6-foot distancing. They have their masks on during walking through. It's protected, so when the students are ordering their lunch, there's a barrier, transparent barrier between them and the servers. They have disposable lunch trays now, so as soon as they eat, it goes in the trash instead of having to worry about any kind of contamination of use of trays and such like that. There are provided options for fruits and vegetables, but we are not allowed to do more than really kind of recommend or suggest, but we can't enforce that they make different selections at lunch. So they have minimized the snacks, and last I knew there's no ice cream. So that was a little bit of a surprise when the kids came back, but they're doing fine. But they still have some choices in their lunch.
As somebody whose children deplete their lunch account on ice cream, I appreciate that actually. Okay, can we eat lunch with our kids, or can we drop off a lunch for our children?
We're not accepting visitors yet, and so we cannot allow visitors during lunch for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about already, but that the case tracing is the main reason. And regarding lunches being dropped off, we're asking that you not, because of the same reason. You know, if a student forgets an item, as that happens with all of us, adults and kids alike, from time to time, we understand that, but we're asking not to have additional things dropped off at this time. In the past, if there was something dropped off for a child, there was a system in place where a student or a teacher, you know, depending on the time of day, would come to the front and get it and take it back. And now we are doing our very best to prevent additional touches of items. And so for us to be able to find a student, the specific one, to come get their item and take it back, all of those pieces really pulls them out of their time for learning. So we want to try to minimize that as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. And this next one might be for Nurse Rebecca, but I know in the past the policy, as far as I understand it, has been regarding nut products that you could bring nut products to the cafeteria for lunchtime, but you could not have those items in the classroom. Is that still the case this year?
Yes, that has nothing to do with COVID. That is just basic health and safety for all students. The snacks, all the classrooms still need to remain nut-free for everyone's safety. They're a little closer together in there. There's not as, I mean, the teachers are there to monitor, but that's difficult. As far as their lunch goes, they can bring whatever they want for their lunch. They can enjoy their lunch, because then we have the ability for the children that have allergies. It used to be we provided safe zones, because everything served from the cafeteria line is safe as far as allergen free. And so we would seat those kids around the kids who bought lunch. Now they're 6 feet apart anyway, and we can monitor it even closer and keep those that have the severe allergies safe. So that hasn't changed. That's one thing that hadn't changed with COVID.
Amazing. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so moving into some questions about just the overall classroom experience and the curriculum and the schedule. First question is, we used to have PE every day. Since physical activity is critical to a healthy lifestyle, can we have PE every day again?
We look forward to the day that we can have PE every day again, that's for sure. We're so fortunate at our school to have an additional specials with theater in addition to art and music. And so the schedule in the past has allowed us to enjoy PE every day. Part of that, though, required classes to combine at different times. And so we are advised against doing that when at all possible. So what we do encourage is our teachers to provide brain breaks and movement opportunities. We are required by TEA to provide 135 minutes or greater of physical activity in a week. So that every student does have 30 minutes of recess every day. in addition to PE for 50 minutes twice a week. Another thing that we have done, which I know we'll talk about again in a minute, is that we're encouraging our teachers to enjoy the mild weather and take our students for a walk outside to enjoy the sunshine and get some fresh air. But that helps us avoid the hallways so we can keep the hallways clear, which again helps keep us from being too close to one another inside.
Okay, great. Next question is about our backpacks. And you mentioned earlier that the supplies in the classroom are not shared between students, and each student has their own like pencil box and supplies to bring to school, and they go back and forth every day. The backpacks are very heavy, and we have parents asking if the pencil boxes and general supplies could be left at school when we have those supplies at home already.
I completely understand that question. I would encourage you to reach out to your child's teacher, as every grade level is a little different. One of the main concerns with that of things going back and forth and staying in the backpack is in the event that we had to all go remote again suddenly. One of the things we experienced last spring was so many students didn't have the supplies they needed at home. And right now, consistency is key. So we try to say that if, one student's taking them home, then we're all going to. However, there are surely supplies in the backpacks that may not be needed every day. So that's why I encourage you to talk to your teacher and see what they recommend. Part of the classroom setup also, as you can imagine, with all of the desks spread out due to distancing, there is not as much space for, or really very little space for, additional furniture in a teacher's classroom. Therefore, it has minimized some of their storage opportunities, and where they may have been able to store student supplies in some locations previously, they may not have that opportunity, or also trying to minimize students walking around the room, being near each other again. So that's where the reasoning behind the supply staying in the backpack is. But if you have concerns, I would reach out to your child's teacher.
Okay, great. Will there be an opportunity for remote learners to borrow library books?
I think Mrs. Boyd is on here, so she can always hop in too. But yes, we will have a procedure in place for that when it's time. Right now, the majority of our books are packed away, snug in the Learning Commons, waiting to be unpacked hopefully soon. But yes, we will have a procedure in place that the district librarians have come up with. One of the tricky pieces to it is when a book is in the hands of a staff member or a student, when it is returned, it has to be quarantined for 7 days. And so that takes a very special system to ensure that our books are helping all of us stay well.
Okay. I didn't know that book quarantine was a thing.
Yes.
Okay. Next question is, why doesn't my second grader work more on paper than on the iPad? And I think generally, as parents, we all have concerns about the amount of technology and screen time. And so there's a balance that we need to strike between having kids with pencils and paper and real books versus the iPad, especially for the younger learners. So can you talk a little bit about that and what the policy is at school?
Absolutely. I would again say, if you have concerns about iPad use, I would reach out to your child's teacher. I know that our district vision for iPads is it's a tool for learning. Just as we view scissors and crayons and pencils and paper across every grade level, they all have a benefit for different skills that students acquire. So an iPad is just one of those tools. As I've been walking around, looking through windows, watching the learning that students are doing, I do see devices being used to enhance learning. Also with Seesaw being our LMS, our learning management system, that's how teachers are managing work, so that a student may write a story, but then they may take a picture and post it on Seesaw. So they would still be writing the story on paper, but then to keep from turning in pieces of paper for the teacher to touch everybody's paper, they may have that posted on Seesaw. So part of that is the transition from remote, where a lot of it had to be digital, although we strongly recommend a balance of all of those things. So I think it's still just coming in and finding that balance. But it is absolutely important to us to be one of the tools of learning, but not the only one.
Okay, great. In regards to the curriculum, what is the best place for parents to look to find information on what their child will be learning this year? Is that the website or Seesaw, or where can we find, what's the best source of that information?
So during the very first week of school, we had a virtual curriculum night, and teachers provided information to families regarding information for the school year, and they had some content highlights. And so if you have any specific questions beyond what they provided, I would reach out again to your teachers and ask them any questions that you may have about that.
Okay. That is all for that category. The next category is visitors and volunteers. And you already mentioned that visitors and volunteers are not allowed to come to campus at this time. With regard to new families that are new to Brantford, either because they have a kindergarten or a pre-K, or they've recently moved into the district and they've never been in the school to see where their kids are going each day, is there a tour available for those families, or either in person or virtually, so that they can see inside?
Yes, so we did reach out to our new families in August and offer a tour of the school when it was still rather empty, when students were not on campus. And then now, if we have any new students that were unable at that time or moving forward, they can call Shelly in the office and schedule a tour. She's happy to give tours of our building and talk about Brainsford. They do have to stay around 10 minutes. We want them less than 15, just due to exposure. And then if anybody comes, they do have to fill out the we have a little QR code at the front door to make sure that they don't have any symptoms and have to wear a mask the whole time. And we would hold those after school hours when we don't have students on campus.
Okay, good to know. Also regarding volunteers, I know the PTA typically does a lot to support teachers in the classrooms, especially the younger grades, things like making copies, assembling those reading packets for kids, and even helping out with reading groups. Is there any way for us to support teachers virtually, or just how can we help them out? Because we know that the workload is the same, if not more, and we are anxious to help. So how can we best do that?
And I will tell you, we are so looking forward to the day that we can open our doors and you guys can come back inside, I'm telling you. But our teachers are doing an incredible job. At this time right now, we can't allow visitors or volunteers to come in and help with these things. Teachers are doing it, they're doing all right. As far as assembling things, if they were to have maybe a special project to have items cut out or created, they could reach out to parents. And so if you're willing to do a project like that, I encourage you to talk to your child's teacher and say, hey, if you ever need a project that I can do from home, please let me know how I can help. Those types of things really help teachers out. They're glad to pack it up and send it home if that's something that you're able to help with. And, you know, regarding reading groups and things like that, we also look forward to the time when we can have our volunteers come in and help with our students. At this time, we can't do it, but we look forward to that. So I'd just reach out to your child's teacher and see what they may need at this time. And then they'll already have that connection with you so that when we do have the opportunity to open our doors, then you already have that connection made. Okay,
great. So regarding car line and dismissal, I was very surprised that no questions were submitted about the car line because that's been a hot topic on social media. So it must be going very smoothly for everybody. But I wanted to give you the opportunity to share anything, if there's anything you want to address regarding drop off and pickup.
Yes, please. So I am so happy to see that, you know, there weren't, but I will tell you, Carline is going really well. I mean, it really is in part to the partnership for our families and our staff. You know, we're welcoming 300 kids every morning in 15 minutes because we're not opening the door until 7:25 and they have until 7:40 to get into class. And so that's a really big deal to get that many kids in the building safely and happily. and as well as getting them sent back home at the end of the day. There are many, many moving parts, and there are parts that we're still working on with schedules and people being able to be at certain spots by the end of the day. So we're still working through those pieces that we know still need a little work, but we appreciate your patience on that. Some things that can help with arrival is, we've been talking to the students about this in announcements, is having them ready to exit the vehicle. We're not allowed to reach in and unbuckle a child from a car seat or a seatbelt. So to have them ready when you do pull up and stop, they're ready to hop out with their backpack and have their mask and their supplies ready to go. The mask is the biggie right now. That's probably been the one thing that that's okay. It's okay that they're learning that habit. But I would encourage them when you get near school, okay, do you have your mask? Do you have your backpack ready? Okay, we're almost there. And then when it's time to unbuckle and be ready to open the door and get out. Then at dismissal, we have our yellow signs with our students' names on them. I know it's so helpful for us if it's up where we can see it. Some people use a little hanger, like a pants hanger, and they will clip it and then hang it on their rear view mirror. That helps us, because I will tell you, the glare on a beautiful sunny day makes it a little hard to see through the windshield sometime, but it's awesome. If y'all can leave that in the windshield, even after myself or Mrs. McClure call, as you're pulling up until your child gets in the vehicle, because then those staff that are further down the line, if they see that the sign is still there, then they know that child is still looking for their vehicle. That helps us make sure that everybody gets into their car. And then, of course, always pull forward on the car line. We're fortunate to have a nice big drop-off zone. It is a little confusing when we have pre-K and the kinder hallways, but we ask that you move all the way up so that we can unload in the morning quickly and load in the afternoon. That helps us out a whole lot. But that's me just talking through the procedures. We really feel that the car line is going very well in the morning and in the afternoon. So we appreciate your help.
It's much faster this week, so that's great. Okay, so our last category of questions is regarding special events and just kind of those special things that we do as a school. So I know that field trips currently are canceled. Are they canceled for the whole year, or are they just canceled for the first semester? Can you clarify that? And also, the 4th grade typically goes to Sky Ranch for an overnight trip each year. Is there any plan to try to defer that to the spring this year?
So regarding field trips, right now they're canceled. We do not have a definite answer on that because things have changed so differently. We are hesitant to say they're canceled for the year, because if things were to improve in the spring, that'd be great for us to be able to go on a field trip. So we don't want to say no. But we want to say not right now and see what happens. We are looking forward to having some virtual field trip opportunities. There are so many out there. And I heard that being spoken about. I think Christy was talking about that earlier. So we look forward to providing those experiences for our students. It'll just look differently right now. Regarding Sky Ranch, it is postponed at this time. We'll continue to evaluate it and we'll reassess as we go. But one thought that we've had is we've considered looping Sky Ranch to 5th grade. So the students that are in 4th will still have that opportunity if they don't get to this year. A lot of schools in our district, that's when they take their big trip, is as 5th graders. And so that is a thought that we've had, that we haven't landed there yet. But we do not want the students that are in 4th grade to miss out on that opportunity. And so that has been kind of one of our thoughts that we might investigate further when we get further on in the year.
Okay, great to hear. So with regard to classroom parties, usually we have parties for Christmas and Valentine's Day. Are those officially canceled or on or possible? What's the status on those?
We don't have an official word on those yet. Again, it's one of those things that, and although it feels far away, I don't think it is all that far away before a holiday party, but at this time we don't have a decision, and if they're canceled, they may look different if we are able to do those. So we'll keep you informed on that. When we get closer, we'll evaluate based on the guidelines that were given at that time.
Okay. And then picture day, is that happening this year? And if so, how will that work for online learners?
We absolutely plan to still have picture day, and we have moved it to the spring just because of the different guidelines that we've been given for this fall. So we'll have a picture day in the spring, and we'll have definitely a plan in place for our remote learners to be able to join as well. We want to have everybody's picture in our yearbook if possible.
Okay, great. So that is the end of the questions that were submitted. I did want to, just as a wrap up, just generally give you the opportunity. I know you send out the weekly newsletter for just updates to all families. If somebody is not receiving that information on a weekly basis from you, how do they get on the distribution list for that?
So that's based on the emails that are entered into Skyward. And so if they're not receiving that, I would encourage them to log into Skyward and double check the email that they have allotted for that communication.
Okay, great. And then can you just talk generally about your what you're excited about being at Brantford, and if there's any specific goals you have for this year for the school?
You bet. Well, my goal always at a school is to provide a safe and a happy learning environment for everybody that's involved. With the pandemic, I will say it's added an additional layer because we have the procedures and protocols to follow, but we are doing the best to our ability to ensure that our staff and our students stay healthy. I'm currently working on our campus improvement plan. That is something that our principal works on every year for their campus. And I'm working to get that completed so I can submit it to our board for approval, to our school board, and also our campus excellence committee will review it throughout the year to look for growth. We have several goals, but a few of those include providing professional learning for our staff. It's such a unique time in education. As you can imagine, they have learned so much, especially with connecting and communicating and streamlining everything so that they're able to meet all of the unique learners' needs to the best of their ability. As well as continuing to effectively integrate arts and content across our campus with fidelity. I get to learn so much about arts integration being here at Brantford. I'm very excited about that. And that is still a very high priority of ours, regardless of a pandemic or not. So we still hold that to a high regard.
Anyone has additional questions that were not addressed tonight or just follow-up questions, what is the best way to get those to you?
They can always email me, and if it's anything that is regarding attendance, again, they could reach out to Sam McFadden, or if it's a general health concern or question, Nurse Rebecca is happy to answer those for you. We're all here to help. You can always call Shelly, and she will direct you to the person that can help out.
Thank you everyone for joining. That is the end of our meeting and our Q&A session.